The ending of Plato's Phaedo is one of the most important literary moments in Western civilization, for it portrays the death of the very archetype of rationality. Socrates had, through his rationality, mastered himself, which for the ancients can be summarized as resolutely facing death. Socrates' calm, noble demeanor, his utter lack of fear, is remarkable. For the ancients, and especially for Plato, there was no limit to the utility of such a state of self-mastery. It's telling that in the structure of the Phaedo, we transfer from a section of arguments, or what Greeks would call logos, into a section of mythos, or what the Greeks would call muthos. This draws up for us a deep question about the role of myth and drama in the attempt by the human being to accommodate oneself to reality and pose and answer questions about the ultimate status of human reality. The conundrum that the Phaedo really brings up is that the question of how we can master ourselves in the face of a reality that's impermanent. Can scientific truth, pure and simple, orient our worldview, or do we need a substructure of mythology? Socrates, we can see in the Phaedo, is portrayed as the kind of character whose mind and rationality embraces both a logos, or rational argumentation, and a mythos, or a storytelling dimension that animates those arguments into a coherent view of human reality. Mythos for the ancient Greeks does not have the same connotations you might associate with it today. That is to say that a myth has a lesser status as opposed to literal or scientific truth. We say things like, that's merely a myth, to indicate that that is just a story with no force. But that's not the way Socrates is approaching things here, where myth has the force of communicating something to you that's deeply true. The point of this myth is to apply the previous discussion about the immortality of the soul to the real question, which is, how do we comport ourselves in this existence? The answer is that we need to comport ourselves toward reality in such a way that takes account not only of the temporal and the passing, but also of the eternal. The part of ourselves that's concerned with the eternal is our soul. Our body is concerned with the passing. And becoming aware of oneself as having some stake in the eternal is absolutely crucial, at least on the ancient view, about what human existence consists of. In short, if the soul has a purchase in eternity, you'd better get going in ordering your soul according to good principles. What therefore needs to be carefully gleaned from the last part of Plato's Phaedo is Plato's subtle literary characterization of the person of wisdom going smoothly between logos, or scientific argumentation, and mythos. Socrates courteously bows his head to those objecting to his points of view. It's clear that in the moment of his death, Socrates is invested with a sort of sacred character, almost like a prophet. Plato is carrying out here in a literary fashion the categorical elevation of Socrates above his circumstances, above the humdrum of everyday life. And so we should think, even if this myth that Socrates is telling is not literally true, could Plato have replaced the force of this impression of Socrates going above and beyond the mundane in any other way? At the end of the Phaedo, the hour comes where Socrates finally has to actually drink the poison. Socrates isn't concerned with how they're going to go about burying him after he dies, for the burial will be merely a burial of his body, the most inessential part of himself. Socrates calmly bathes himself as those around him continue to grow more and more emotional. Even the prison guard is coming to an emotional turn. Crito informs Socrates that some people put off drinking the poison as long as possible in order to spend their final moments engaged in pleasurable activities. But we know that Socrates, in his rejection of bodily pleasures, won't have any time for that. He drinks the poison in good cheer and chastises those around him for weeping. This is the utter self-mastery that Socrates is presented as having. Finally, his legs start to feel numb, and so he lays down until finally the poison works its way into his heart and his body gives way to death. Some have disputed the factual elements of Plato's account of hemlock poisoning, arguing that it would be rather violent and unpleasant and not as serene as that depicted in Plato. But of course, the literary function of that depiction is clear. Socrates is totally unmoved by the problems and burdens of the body. In Socrates' final words, he informs Crito that they owe a rooster to Asclepius. He tells Crito not to forget to make this offering. The offering of a rooster to Asclepius is an offer that's made by the sick to the god of medicine upon being healed. The implication here is that Socrates sees life as a kind of sickness of which he'll be relieved in his death.